billionaire's secret legacy, a wedding day revelation. His coffee was cold, his empire soaring. He was days from marrying a supermodel when a phone call ripped open his perfectly constructed world. Can you imagine finding out you have 3 identical children you never knew existed on the very eve of your wedding? Where are you watching this from? Tell us in the comments. Don't miss this incredible story of revenge, shattered secrets, and unexpected redemption. Subscribe now and like for more stories that will leave you speechless. The reflection of Sterling Tower's imposing glass and steel distorted in the artificial lake surrounding Tech's headquarters. Alexander Hayes gazed at the London skyline from his top-floor office, his fingers drumming on the mahogany desk as he held the phone to his ear. At 30, Forbes magazine had named him one of the most successful entrepreneurs of the decade. His angular face, framed by a perfectly trimmed beard, tightened slightly as he waited for his call to be answered. "Good morning. May I speak with Dr. Carter?" he asked in a controlled voice, though his heart hammered against his chest. "One moment, please," the pediatric hospital receptionist replied. While waiting, Alexander swiveled his chair to contemplate the city. He had built an empire from scratch, transforming a simple university idea into a multi-billion-dollar company. His deep brown eyes reflected determination and a peculiar gleam that only appeared when he thought of her, of Claire. "Hello?" The female voice on the other end of the line momentarily paralyzed his thoughts. "Claire, it's Alexander," he said, trying to sound casual. "Alexander Hayes." A prolonged silence told him she remembered him perfectly. "Well, what a surprise," Claire finally replied, her voice laced with caution. "Has it been, 6 years?" 6 years, 2 months, and 17 days, he specified, immediately regretting the precision that revealed too much. "Roughly." Alexander stood and walked to the window. His reflection showed a successful man in an impeccable Italian suit, but his eyes betrayed a vulnerability no one else could see. "To what do I owe your call after all this time?" Claire asked directly. Alexander took a deep breath before launching the words he had rehearsed for weeks. "I'm getting married in 3 weeks. I wanted to invite you personally." Another silence, this one even longer than the last. Alexander could perfectly imagine Claire's expression, eyebrows slightly raised, lips pressed, perhaps a small furrow between her brows. "You're inviting me to your wedding?" Her incredulous tone confirmed exactly what he expected: bewilderment. "Yes," Alexander replied with feigned casualness. "Isabel and I want to gather all the important people in our lives. You were significant in mine." As he uttered these words, he unconsciously caressed the golden envelope on his desk, containing the formal invitation. What Claire didn't know was that this call was part of a meticulously orchestrated plan. The invitation to his wedding with Isabel Dawson, an international model and the current face of several luxury brands, wasn't a gesture of reconciliation. It was the first step of a carefully planned revenge. "Your invitation surprises me, but thank you," Claire finally replied. "I'll try to attend." "Perfect. The formal invitation will arrive at your address tomorrow," Alexander concluded, allowing himself a small smile of satisfaction. "It was good to hear from you again." When he hung up, his assistant entered the office with a tablet in her hand. "Mr. Hayes, Ms. Jenkins is waiting for you." "For the 11 o'clock meeting?" Alexander nodded, quickly regaining his composure. "Thank you, Laura. Tell Sophia I'll be with her in 5 minutes." As he put away his phone, a feeling of triumph surged through him. Claire Carter, the woman who had abandoned him when he needed her most, would see everything he had achieved without her. She would see the empire he had built. She would meet his stunning future wife and understand exactly what she had lost by breaking his heart 6 years ago. What Alexander couldn't imagine was that this perfect plan was about to reveal a secret that would change his life forever. What do you think Claire's reaction to Alexander's invitation truly means? Could there be more to her 6 years of silence than Alexander knows? Share your theories in the comments below. And if you're hooked, hit the like button and subscribe for more unexpected revelations. Claire Carter let the phone drop onto her desk as if it burned her hand. Her hands trembled slightly as she tried to process what had just happened. Alexander Hayes, after 6 years of absolute silence, was inviting her to his wedding. A nervous laugh escaped her lips as she ran her fingers through her brown hair, now cut to shoulder length. The walls of her consulting room at St. Raphael's Children's Hospital were decorated with colorful drawings by her young patients. On the shelf behind her desk rested several photo frames. 3 of them showed identical 5-year-old boys with mischievous smiles and intense brown eyes. Exactly Alexander's eyes. "Dr. Carter, your next patient is ready," the nurse interrupted, peeking through the door. "Thank you, Teresa. Just a minute, please," Claire replied, trying to regain her professional composure. She stood and approached one of the photographs, tenderly caressing the children's faces. Matthew, Daniel, and Charlie. Her triplets, her sons, Alexander's sons, whom he knew nothing about. She vividly remembered the last time she had tried to contact him. It was when the boys were just a year old. She had drafted an email with attached photos and a detailed explanation. The reply came quickly, but it wasn't what she expected. "Please stop trying to contact Alexander. He has moved on with his life, and any paternity claim at this time would only harm his public image and the company's stability. Sophia Jenkins, Executive Director, AH Tech." After that email, Claire decided not to try anymore. If Alexander allowed his mentor to answer such personal matters, there clearly was no room in his life for 3 children. The sound of her mobile phone brought her back to the present. It was a message from her mother. "I can pick up the boys at 4. I promised to take them to the park." Claire replied affirmatively and put away her phone. She would have to make a decision about Alexander's invitation. Should she attend and finally reveal the existence of his sons, or would it be better to maintain her distance, as she had done all these years? Her mind inevitably drifted back to her university days, Alexander and she studying until dawn, he frantically coding while she reviewed anatomy. She remembered their first date, an impromptu picnic on campus, the way his eyes sparkled when he talked about his tech ideas, how he would change the world, and then the gradual distancing as his project became an obsession. "I can't keep competing with your company, Alexander," she had told him on the day of their breakup. "There's no room for us in your life anymore." He had tried to convince her that things would get better once he secured the necessary funding, that he just needed a little more time. But Claire knew a pattern when she saw one, and now, 6 years later, Alexander Hayes was exactly what he had always dreamed of: a tech magnate, an acclaimed visionary, and soon, a married man. Claire opened her desk drawer and pulled out a yellow envelope. Inside was an ultrasound from 6 years ago, clearly showing 3 tiny embryos. The last ultrasound before Alexander disappeared from her life, consumed by his nascent business empire. "Dr. Carter, the child is waiting," Teresa insisted from the doorway. "I'll be right there," Claire replied, quickly putting away the ultrasound. As she put on her white coat, she made a decision. She would attend that wedding, but she wouldn't go alone. It was time for Alexander Hayes to meet his sons. If he was willing to invite her to his wedding as a trophy of his success, he would have to be prepared for the consequences of their reunion. What Claire couldn't imagine was the chain of events her decision would unleash, and how the ordered life she had built for herself and her sons was about to be completely transformed. What role do you think Sophia Jenkins played in keeping Alexander from his children? And how will Alexander react when he sees Claire with his triplets at his wedding? Share your dramatic predictions in the comments. If you're on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and subscribe for more mind-blowing twists. Sophia Jenkins watched Alexander intently from across the conference table. At 55, she remained an imposing woman, her black hair pulled back in a severe bun, her pantsuit impeccable. She had been the first to believe in Alexander's potential when he was just a university student with a brilliant idea. Now, as CEO and his right hand, she guarded AH Tech's interests with the ferocity of a lioness protecting her cub. The new operating system launch must coincide with the merger announcement, Sophia noted, sliding a document towards Alexander. Shareholders expect significant media impact. Alexander nodded distractedly. His mind was still on his conversation with Claire. There was something in her voice, a reserve he didn't expect. After 6 years, he had expected to detect surprise, perhaps envy or regret. But Claire sounded different, almost as if she held a secret. "Alexander?" Sophia insisted, frowning slightly. "Are you listening to me?" "Sorry, Sophia," he replied, refocusing. "I was thinking about the wedding. Many details are still pending." Sophia narrowed her eyes, evaluating his expression. "Did you invite Claire Carter as planned?" Alexander was surprised. Although Sophia knew almost every aspect of his life, he didn't recall mentioning his intention to invite Claire. "That's right. I just spoke to her," he confirmed, studying his mentor's reaction. A fleeting glint crossed Sophia's eyes before her face returned to its usual impassivity. "And did she accept the invitation?" she asked casually, though her fingers tightened imperceptibly on the folder she held. "She said she'd try to attend," Alexander replied. She seemed surprised. Sophia leaned back in her seat with an inscrutable expression. "That's natural. You haven't had contact in years. Are you sure this won't complicate your relationship with Isabel?" "Isabel knows about Claire," Alexander lied. "I explained she was someone important in my past, and that I wanted to close that chapter by inviting her to the wedding. The reality was that Isabel Dawson, his 28-year-old fiancée, had no idea Claire existed. His relationship with the model had begun just a year ago, a media-savvy courtship that benefited both. She gained credibility by associating with a respected entrepreneur, and he achieved the perfect image of a successful man with a stunning woman by his side. Marriage was the logical next step in his plan to project an image of absolute success, and Claire witnessing it was the icing on the cake. "Well," Sophia continued, changing the subject, "regarding the Singapore contracts." The meeting continued for another hour, but Alexander couldn't shake the feeling that Sophia seemed unusually interested in Claire. When he was finally alone in the conference room, he took out his phone and opened an old photograph stored in a protected folder. In it, Claire and he smiled in front of a lake, their faces young and hopeful. It had been taken a week before she left him, claiming his obsession with the nascent company had killed their relationship. At that moment, Alexander was about to secure his first major round of funding. He needed Claire to understand the pressure he was under, to give him more time. But she had chosen to abandon him at his most crucial moment. The sound of the door startled him. Sophia had returned and was watching him from the threshold. "I forgot my tablet," she explained, approaching the table. Her gaze briefly stopped on Alexander's phone screen before he could lock it. "I see you're reminiscing." Alexander put the device away, uncomfortable. "I was just checking I have the correct address to send her the invitation." Sophia took her tablet and headed towards the door, but before leaving, she stopped. "Be careful, Alexander," she said without looking at him, The past has a nasty habit of resurfacing at the most inopportune moments. When the door closed behind her, Alexander felt an inexplicable shiver. For an instant, it seemed that Sophia knew something he didn't, something related to Claire, but he quickly dismissed that thought. It was impossible. No one knew his true intentions with this invitation. What Alexander couldn't know was that Sophia Jenkins held a secret she had protected for years, a secret that threatened to destroy everything he had built, and that the arrival of the invitation to Claire's hands would be the trigger that would detonate that time bomb. What shocking secret do you think Sophia Jenkins has been hiding from Alexander for all these years? And what will happen on his wedding day when this truth explodes? Share your theories in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more shocking revelations. "Mom, Daniel took my dinosaur!" shouted Charlie, the youngest of the triplets by just 2 minutes, as he ran to Claire with tears in his brown eyes. Claire put her groceries on the kitchen counter and knelt to her son's height. "Daniel, come here, please," she called in a firm but calm voice. The second triplet appeared in the kitchen doorway, holding a green plastic T-Rex with a guilty expression on his face, identical to his brother's. "It was my turn," he argued, though his voice betrayed that he knew perfectly well he was wrong. Matthew, the oldest of the three by just a minute, joined the group with crossed arms and a mediator's stance. "I told him to wait. Your turn, Mom." But he didn't listen. Claire looked at her 3 sons with a mix of tenderness and firmness. They were physically identical. The same black, slightly wavy hair, the same intense brown eyes, the same smile that caused a small dimple on their left cheek. But their personalities were completely distinct. Matthew, the responsible one. Daniel, the adventurous one. Charlie, the sensitive one. And all 3, living images of their father. "Daniel, you know we have rules about sharing toys," Claire explained patiently. "Give it back to Charlie and wait your turn." Daniel sighed dramatically, but obeyed, handing the dinosaur to his brother with a soft, "Sorry," mumbled through gritted teeth. "Now help me put away the groceries," Claire instructed, standing up. "And then we'll have dinner." The 3 boys hurried to help, creating a small assembly line to move food from bags to the pantry. Claire watched them with a divided heart. The golden envelope that had arrived that morning lay on the dining table like a constant reminder of the decision she had to make. When the boys washed their hands and sat at the table, Claire served the stew her mother had prepared before leaving. Eleanor Hayes had been her rock during these years, helping her raise the triplets while she completed her pediatric residency. "Mom, can we go to the zoo this weekend?" Matthew asked, carefully blowing on his hot spoon. "The teacher said there are new baby pandas," Charlie added, his eyes sparkling with excitement. "And giant crocodiles, too," Daniel completed, making a threatening gesture with his small hands. Claire smiled, but her mind raced. She had only 2 weeks to decide if she would take the boys to Alexander's wedding. 2 weeks to determine if it was the right time for the father to meet his sons and vice versa. "We'll see if we can go," she finally replied. "But first, I want to talk to you about something important." The 3 identical pairs of eyes fixed on her with curiosity. "Do you remember when I told you that everyone has a daddy, even if some daddies don't live with their children?" Claire began, carefully choosing her words. The boys nodded in unison. "Is our daddy coming?" Charlie asked, always the most intuitive. Claire felt the air leave her lungs. Sometimes her children's perceptiveness surprised her. "Not exactly," she replied honestly. "But there's a chance we might meet him soon." "Is he an astronaut?" Daniel asked excitedly. "Michael says his daddy is a pilot and travels all over the world." "No, he's not an astronaut," Claire smiled. "He's a businessman. He works with computers and technology. Like Iron Man? Daniel's eyes lit up. Not that extravagant, Claire laughed. But yes, he works with advanced technology. When Matthew, always the most serious, watched her with a thoughtful expression. Why doesn't he live with us? He finally asked, the question Claire had always feared. She took a deep breath before answering. Your daddy and I separated before he knew you were on the way, and he doesn't know you exist, she explained softly. Not because he didn't want you, but because he never had the opportunity to know you. And why didn't you tell him? Matthew insisted, frowning exactly as Alexander did when something didn't make sense to him. Claire felt a lump in her throat. How could she explain the complexities of her situation to a 5-year-old? How could she tell him that she had tried to contact his father several times without success? That she had received curt replies from a woman who apparently controlled every aspect of Alexander's life? I tried, she finally said. But sometimes things don't work out as we expect. However, now there's a chance you might meet him, and I wanted to prepare you for that. What if he doesn't like us? Charlie's small voice reflected genuine fear. Claire opened her arms, and the 3 boys rushed to circle the table and hug her. That's impossible, she assured, kissing their heads. No one who knows you could not love you. As she hugged her sons, Claire made her decision. She would attend Alexander Hayes' wedding, and she would bring the triplets with her. Not as an act of revenge, but as an act of justice. Alexander had a right to know his sons, and more importantly, they had a right to know their father. What Claire couldn't foresee was that this decision would unleash a series of events that would forever change not only Alexander's life, but also the lives of everyone involved in this complex story of secrets and truths hidden for too long. How will Alexander react when he sees Claire with his triplets at his wedding? What role will Sophia Jenkins play when the truth is revealed? Share your dramatic predictions in the comments. If you're on the edge of your seat, hit that like button and subscribe for more explosive revelations. Sophia Jenkins observed the London night from the window of her elegant apartment on the 30th floor of an exclusive building. In one hand, she held a glass of red wine. In the other, her mobile phone. The screen showed a newly received message from Michael Green, Alexander's old friend. We met today. She's coming to the wedding with the children. Sophia let out a long sigh. For 6 years, she had carefully protected this secret, intercepting emails, blocking calls, returning letters, all to safeguard Alexander's future, and by extension, the future of the company they had both built. She walked towards her study, an impeccably tidy room where every object had its precise place. From a locked drawer, she extracted a folder simply labeled CC. Opening it, dozens of letters and printed emails unfolded before her eyes. 6 years of Claire's attempts to contact Alexander. The last letter included a photograph of 3 identical babies, barely a year old, smiling at the camera. Sophia ran her fingers over the image with an inscrutable expression. Had she done the right thing? At that moment, with Tech on the verge of securing its first major round of funding, the news that its young CEO had gotten his ex-girlfriend pregnant would have been devastating for the company's image. Or at least, that's what she had told herself to justify her actions. Her phone rang, startling her. It was Alexander. I need to talk to you, he said, without preamble when Sophia answered. Now. The urgency in his voice was unusual. It's almost 11 at night, Alexander, she replied calmly. Can it wait until tomorrow? No. The firmness in his tone brooked no argument. I'm in your building's lobby. Sophia felt a chill. Quickly, she put the folder back in the drawer and locked it. Come up, she finally conceded. While waiting, she mentally arranged her thoughts. Had Alexander discovered something? Had Claire contacted him directly? The doorbell rang minutes later. Opening the door, Sophia found a visibly agitated Alexander. His shirt was wrinkled, as if he had spent hours sitting in the same position, and his normally perfect hair was disheveled. "Claire has children," he blurted out without preamble as he entered the apartment. 5-year-old triplets. Sophia maintained a neutral expression, though her mind raced. "If that surprises you, why?" she asked with feigned innocence. Alexander looked her directly in the eyes. "Because the timing coincides exactly with our breakup," he replied, intently studying her reaction. "Which leads me to wonder if there's a possibility they're mine." Sophia moved with deliberate slowness towards the wet bar. "Can I pour you something? You look like you need it." "What I need are answers," Alexander insisted, following her. "Did you know something about this?" Sophia poured him a whiskey before replying. "What makes you think I would have information about your ex-girlfriend's personal life?" Alexander took the glass, but didn't drink. "Because you've handled my personal correspondence for years," he replied, his tone accusatory. "Because you've systematically filtered who can approach me and who cannot. And because your reaction when you found out Claire would come to the wedding with 3 guests was very revealing." Sophia maintained her composure, though internally, she recognized she had underestimated Alexander's perceptiveness. "You're making conjectures based on coincidences," she argued, sitting elegantly on one of the sofas. "Claire could have rebuilt her life soon after leaving you. Those children could be anyone else's. And why bring them specifically to my wedding, requesting front-row seats?" Alexander questioned, his voice rising slightly. "It makes no sense unless—" He cut himself off, as if the realization struck him suddenly. "Unless she wants me to see them," he finished in a whisper. "Unless she wants me to know they're mine." Sophia understood it was useless to keep denying. "Sit down, Alexander," she instructed in a soft but authoritative voice, the same one she had used years ago when he was just a young programmer with ambitious dreams. "There's something I need to show you." Reluctantly, Alexander obeyed. Sophia went to her study and returned moments later with the folder. She placed it on the coffee table without a word. "What is this?" he asked, looking at the object warily. "Open the folder," she simply replied. With slightly trembling fingers, Alexander lifted the cover. His eyes widened in surprise as he discovered the contents. Dozens of letters, printed emails, even some ultrasounds, all addressed to him, all from Claire. "What does this mean?" His voice was barely audible. "It means Claire tried to contact you," Sophia explained, maintaining a professional tone. "Multiple times." Alexander picked up one of the ultrasounds. It clearly showed 3 small embryos. "And you intercepted all this?" Disbelief turned to anger in his voice. "By what right?" Sophia braced herself for the confrontation she had feared for years. "By the right given to me by building this company with you from scratch," she replied firmly. "We were about to close the first major funding round. Your image as a young visionary and focused leader was crucial. A paternity scandal would have sunk us." "They were my children," Alexander exclaimed, standing abruptly. "My decision." "You were young and impulsive," Sophia countered. "You would have abandoned everything for a responsibility you weren't ready for. All our work, our sacrifices, would have been in vain." Alexander frantically flipped through the contents of the folder, his hands trembling more and more. "All these letters," he murmured, his voice broken by emotion. "All these years." He paused at a photograph of 3 babies, approximately 1 year old. The same eyes, the same smile he saw every morning in the mirror. "I have children." He uttered these words as if trying to convince himself. "I have 3 children who don't know me, who have grown up thinking I abandoned them." Sophia tried to approach, but Alexander raised a hand to stop her. "Did you reply to these letters?" It wasn't a question, but a statement. "Did you reply pretending to be me?" "It was for the best for everyone," Sophia insisted. Claire would move on. You would focus on the company, and eventually... Eventually what? Alexander interrupted her, his voice glacial. "Were you planning to tell me someday, or were you hoping I'd never find out?" Sophia fell silent, recognizing she had no answer to that question. Alexander gathered all the letters and photographs, putting them back in the folder. "I'm taking this," he declared with a calm that contrasted with the storm in his eyes. "And Sophia, you're fired." She looked at him in disbelief. "You can't be serious." The company will survive," Alexander cut her off. "But our professional relationship ends here. You have betrayed my trust in the worst way possible." He headed towards the door with the folder firmly tucked under his arm. "Alexander, think about it," Sophia insisted, following him. "Everything I did was for your good, for our good." He stopped at the threshold, turning to look at her one last time. "No, you did it for control, because you couldn't stand the idea of losing it," he replied with surprising clarity. "You stole 6 years with my children. That's something I can never get back." And with these words, he left the apartment, leaving Sophia alone with the weight of her decisions. As the elevator descended, Alexander looked at the photographs of his children with a mix of emotion and pain. Small versions of himself who had been born, taken their first steps, said their first words, all without his knowing. His phone vibrated in his pocket. It was a message from Isabel. "Where are you? We have the menu tasting tomorrow, early." The wedding, with everything that had been discovered, he had completely forgotten his impending marriage, a marriage that now presented itself in a completely different light. As he left the building into the night, Alexander faced the biggest crossroads of his life. In 1 week, he would not only see his children for the first time, but he would have to decide what kind of man, what kind of father he wanted to be. And that decision would change the course of many lives, including his own. How will Alexander confront Isabel about the canceled wedding and his newfound children? What emotional roller coaster awaits him and Claire as they attempt to connect after 6 lost years? Share your predictions in the comments. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more powerful turns. The wind gently ruffled Claire's hair as she watched the triplets run along the beach. She had decided to take them to the seaside the weekend before the wedding, a small respite before the storm ahead. "Look, Mom!" Daniel shouted, holding up an especially large seashell. "It's like a giant's house." "It's beautiful, darling," she replied with a smile, sitting on a colorful towel. Matthew and Charlie competed to build the tallest sandcastle, their small hands working with absolute concentration. The afternoon sun bathed the scene in a golden light that made the seawater sparkle as if sprinkled with diamonds. Claire took out her phone and captured the moment. The 3 boys, so physically alike, yet so distinct in personality, enjoying the simple joy of the beach. Her heart clenched at the thought that in just 7 days, the life they knew could change forever. Her phone vibrated in her hand with an incoming call. Unknown number. With some apprehension, she answered. "Dr. Carter?" The male voice on the other end sounded tense, almost unrecognizable. "Yes. Who's speaking?" she asked, though a part of her already knew. "It's Alexander," he confirmed after a brief pause. "We need to talk." Claire instinctively looked towards her children, who remained absorbed in their games, oblivious to the conversation that could alter their lives. "About what, exactly?" she asked, maintaining a neutral tone. "You know perfectly well about what." Alexander's voice held a mixture of anguish and urgency. "About our children." Claire felt the air leave her lungs. The moment she had imagined so many times over 6 years had finally arrived, but not in the way she expected. "How did you know?" she finally asked, without trying to deny it. "I found out 3 days ago," he replied. "I found an article that mentioned you were a mother of triplets. Then I confronted Sophia." "Sophia?" Claire repeated, confused. "She intercepted all your attempts to contact me," Alexander explained, his voice breaking slightly. "Letters, emails, messages, everything. I never knew you were pregnant. I never knew I had children." Claire closed her eyes, processing this revelation. For years, she had assumed Alexander had simply chosen to ignore her messages, that he had decided his career was more important than the possibility of being a father. "You never knew," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Never," Alexander confirmed. "Claire, I swear to you, I would never have ignored something like that. Regardless of how we ended, I would never have abandoned my children." A solitary tear rolled down Claire's cheek as she watched the triplets scamper across the beach. 6 years of silent resentment, of nights wondering how a man could reject his own children, vanished in the face of this new truth. "The wedding invitation," she began, trying to understand. "Why did you invite me if you didn't know anything?" There was a prolonged silence before Alexander replied. "Out of pride, out of resentment," he finally admitted, his voice laden with shame. "I wanted you to see everything I had achieved without you, what you could have shared if you had believed in me. It was a stupid, vengeful plan." The raw honesty of his confession surprised her. "And now that you know the truth, what do you want?" Claire asked, trying to stay calm for the sake of the children, who occasionally looked at her while playing. "I want to meet them," he replied without hesitation. "I want to be part of their lives, make up for lost time. I know I have no right to ask, but—" "They're your children, Alexander," Claire interrupted. "Of course you have a right to know them." "What are they like?" he asked, his voice softening. "What are their names?" Claire smiled despite the tears that now flowed freely. "Matthew, Daniel, and Charlie," she replied. "Matthew is the oldest by a minute. He's responsible and analytical, always thinking, always planning. Daniel is the impulsive, brave adventurer. And Charlie? Charlie is the sensitive one, the one who feels everything deeply, like you," Alexander observed, and Claire could imagine his smile on the other end of the line. "Charlie is like you, but all three have your eyes," she added, "and your stubbornness. Definitely genetic." A soft, almost imperceptible chuckle came from the other side. "Claire, about the wedding," Alexander began, his tone changing. "You don't have to explain anything," she interrupted. "I understand you have an established life. Isabel seems like a wonderful person and—" "I've canceled the wedding," Alexander cut her off. "Last night." The surprise left Claire momentarily speechless. "Why?" she finally asked. "Because I can't start a marriage based on lies," he replied simply. "Isabel deserved to know my true reasons for inviting you, and when I explained, well, let's just say she saw a side of me she didn't like. And then, when I told her about the children—" "I'm sorry," Claire said sincerely. "Don't be sorry," Alexander replied. "It was the right thing to do. Isabel and I never was real. I think we both knew it, but it was convenient." A comfortable silence settled between them, so different from the tension that had marked their last conversation 6 years ago. "Can we meet before the date that would have been the wedding?" Alexander finally asked. "In private, just you and me. There's a lot we need to talk about." Claire watched the triplets, who were now running towards her with sea treasures in their hands. "Tomorrow, in the afternoon," she proposed. "The children will be with my mother." "Tomorrow is perfect," Alexander confirmed. "The coffee shop by Central Park at 4? "I'll be there. Claire promised. When they hung up, the children had already reached her, extending their small hands full of shells and colorful stones. "Look at our treasures, Mom!" Charlie exclaimed, his eyes shining with excitement. Claire hugged her three sons tightly, inhaling the scent of sea salt and sun in their hair. "They are the most beautiful treasures in the world," she murmured, with a lump in her throat. "And soon, you'll meet someone very special." "Who?" Matthew asked, always curious. Claire smiled through the tears she couldn't hold back. "Your father," she replied simply. "You're going to meet your father." The children looked at her with a mix of confusion and awe, too young to fully comprehend the magnitude of those words. But soon they would understand. Soon the broken circle of their family would begin to heal, in ways Claire never would have imagined possible. As the sun began to set on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Claire felt for the first time in years that, perhaps, the future could be as beautiful as that sunset. Different from what she had planned, but beautiful in its own way. How will Alexander and Claire's first private meeting go after all these years? What questions will they finally get to ask each other? Share your thoughts below. If you're invested in their journey to mend the past, hit that like button and subscribe for the next emotional chapter. The Parkside Cafe occupied the sunniest corner of Central Park. Its wide windows offered a perfect view of the park, where children and adults enjoyed the spring afternoon. Alexander had arrived half an hour early, too nervous to wait in his apartment. He was dressed casually, but elegantly. Dark jeans, a light blue shirt, and sneakers. He had deliberated at length over his outfit, wanting to project a relaxed but respectable image. Not the CEO of a multinational tech company, but simply a father about to meet his children. He checked his watch for the 10th time. 10:50. They would arrive any minute. His heart pounded so hard he could feel his pulse in his temples. He had negotiated with relentless investors, presented products to thousands of people, appeared on economic magazine covers, but nothing had prepared him for the nervousness he felt now. It was then that he saw them. Claire. She walked along the main path, holding a child's hand on each side. The third walked slightly ahead, curiously observing a squirrel climbing a nearby tree. Alexander froze. From a distance, the resemblance was undeniable. Three small versions of himself, with the same slightly wavy dark hair, the same athletic build, even the same way of walking. "Come on, boys, this way," Claire indicated, guiding them towards the bench where Alexander waited, motionless. When they got close enough, Alexander could distinguish the subtle differences between them. One seemed more serious, observing him with analytical intensity. Another displayed a mischievous, confident smile. The third remained slightly hidden behind Claire, with a cautious but curious expression. "Good morning," Claire greeted with an encouraging smile. "We made it just in time." Alexander nodded, momentarily unable to speak. Finally, he knelt to the children's level. "Hello," he said softly. "My name is Alexander. It's a pleasure to meet you." The serious-looking boy stepped forward. "I'm Matthew," he introduced himself formally, extending his small hand. "I'm 5 years and 3 months old." Alexander shook the offered hand, marveling at the formality of the gesture. "Nice to meet you, Matthew," he replied with equal seriousness. The second boy, with the mischievous smile, stepped forward without waiting for an invitation. "I'm Daniel," he exclaimed enthusiastically. "Is it true you have robots at your work? Mom said you make computers that think on their own." Alexander couldn't help but smile at his energy. "We have some robots, yes," he confirmed. "And we work with artificial intelligence, which are like computers that learn new things every day, just like us," Daniel concluded, visibly impressed. The third boy remained by Claire's side, observing the exchange with attentive eyes. "And you must be Charlie," Alexander guessed, addressing him with special gentleness. The boy nodded without speaking, but held his gaze with a surprising intensity for someone so small. "Charlie is our musician," Claire explained, stroking the boy's hair. "He loves the piano." "I like music too," Alexander commented. "When I was about your age, my grandmother taught me to play some songs." This revelation seemed to pique Charlie's interest, who finally spoke in a soft but clear voice. "Can you play Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star?" "It was my favorite too," Alexander replied with a nostalgic smile. "Maybe we could play it together someday." A silent expectation settled between them. Claire intervened naturally. "How about we walk a bit? We could take a stroll around the lake." The boys nodded enthusiastically. Daniel immediately took the lead, pointing out ducks and asking if they could feed them. Matthew walked next to Claire, occasionally looking back to make sure Charlie and Alexander were following. To everyone's surprise, Charlie approached Alexander and, after a moment of hesitation, extended his hand to him. Alexander took it with infinite care, as if holding something incredibly fragile and precious. They walked like that for a while, in a formation that seemed natural, despite being completely new to everyone. Daniel led the expedition, pointing out animals and plants. Matthew provided fascinating facts about each discovery. Ducks can sleep with half their brain, while the other half is awake. Charlie walked silently beside Alexander, his small hand firmly clasped in the adult's. "Mom says you didn't know we existed," Matthew suddenly commented, turning to look at Alexander. "Is that true?" The direct question surprised Alexander, although Claire had warned him about Matthew's frankness. "It's true," he replied honestly, knowing these children deserved the truth. "I found out about your existence very recently, and it made me very happy." "Why didn't you live with us before?" Matthew insisted. Alexander looked at Claire, who nodded slightly, indicating he should continue. "Your mom and I broke up before she knew you were on the way," he explained carefully. "She tried to tell me, but there were communication problems." "Like when the phone runs out of battery?" Daniel asked, who had come closer to listen. "Something like that," Alexander smiled. "But more complicated. The important thing is that now I know, and I'm very happy to meet you." "You're our daddy, right?" Charlie's soft voice made everyone look at him. His question contained certainty more than doubt. Alexander knelt to his level, still holding his hand. "Yes, Charlie," he confirmed, his voice slightly trembling. "I am your daddy." The three boys exchanged glances, as if having a silent conversation among themselves. Finally, it was Matthew who spoke for the three. "Will you stay now?" he asked, with the relentless logic of a 5-year-old. Daddies should stay with their children. Alexander looked at Claire, aware of the complexity of the situation. She intervened softly. "We live in separate homes," she explained, "like Michael and Lily's parents, remember? But that doesn't mean your daddy can't be part of your lives." "Will you come to see us?" Daniel asked, his enthusiasm barely contained. "Can we visit your work and see the robots?" "I'd love for you to visit my office," Alexander replied sincerely. "And I'll come to see you whenever your mom allows me." "And you'll take us to the zoo," Daniel insisted. "They have new baby pandas." "And giant crocodiles," Charlie added, visibly more animated. Alexander laughed, feeling the knot in his throat begin to loosen. "Zoo, amusement park, beach. Wherever you want to go," he promised. Claire observed the interaction with a mix of conflicting emotions. On one hand, she felt profound joy seeing her children connect so naturally with their father. On the other, an inevitable pang of unease at how quickly Alexander seemed to be winning their affection. "How about we go to the swings?" she suggested, seeing the conversation was becoming too intense. The children responded enthusiastically, running to the playground with renewed energy. Alexander and Claire followed at a slower pace. "They're incredible," he commented, his voice laden with emotion. "So smart, so perfect." "They have their moments," Claire smiled. "You should see them when they fight over the last slice of pizza." Alexander glanced at her. "Thank you for this," he said sincerely, "for letting me meet them, for not keeping them from me, despite everything." "As I said yesterday, I'm doing it for them," Claire replied softly. "But I must warn you, Alexander. If you decide to be part of their lives, you must be permanent. They cannot experience another abandonment." The seriousness in her voice was unmistakable. "I have no intention of disappearing," he assured. "I want to be a real father to them. The rest of my life won't be enough to make up for these 6 lost years, but I'll do everything I can." They reached the swings, where Daniel was already trying to climb the highest one, while Matthew patiently explained why it was dangerous. Charlie watched from a safe distance, waiting his turn. "Will you push me?" Charlie suddenly asked Alexander, pointing to an empty swing. Alexander's heart leaped at this simple gesture of trust. "It would be an honor," he replied, helping the little one get on. For the next hour, Alexander transformed. He, CEO of AH Tech, the calculating businessman, the tech magnate. All those personas disappeared. In their place was simply a father playing with his children, running, laughing, falling and getting up, living for the first time moments that other parents took for granted. Claire watched them from a nearby bench, allowing them to build those first memories together. Her phone vibrated with a message from Liam. "How's it going? I'm here if you need me," she replied with a simple, "All good, I'll call you later," before putting her phone away again. This moment didn't belong to her or Liam. It was the beginning of a bond that, despite the extraordinary circumstances, deserved its own space to flourish. When the children finally tired of playing, they returned to her, their faces flushed with exercise and excitement. "Daddy can throw us really high," Daniel exclaimed, using the word daddy naturally for the first time. Claire noticed how Alexander suppressed emotion at hearing that simple term, which for any other father would be commonplace, but for him represented an entirely new world. "It's time to go," Claire announced, noticing it was nearing lunchtime. "The boys need to eat and rest a bit." Alexander nodded, though his reluctance to end the meeting was evident. "Can I see them soon?" he asked, addressing both Claire and the children. It was Matthew who replied with his usual precision. "You could come for dinner," he suggested, looking at his mother for approval. "Tomorrow is Thursday. On Thursdays, Mom makes spaghetti." Claire smiled at her son's transparency. "If your father doesn't have other commitments, he can come for dinner tomorrow," she conceded. "I'll cancel any commitments," Alexander assured immediately. Daniel jumped with excitement. "And then we can show you our toys. I have a T-Rex that really roars." "And I could show you my rock collection," Matthew added seriously. Charlie, who had remained more reserved, approached Alexander and gently tugged his sleeve. "I have a piano," he said quietly. "We could play together." Alexander knelt to his level. "I'd love that," he replied sincerely. "It's a date then." The children said goodbye with spontaneous hugs that surprised both Alexander and Claire. The naturalness with which they had accepted this new presence in their lives was astonishing and moving. As he watched them walk away down the path, Alexander experienced a mix of emotions he had never felt before. Absolute joy at this discovery, pain for the lost years, and above all, a fierce determination to be the father these three extraordinary children deserved. What none of them could know was that this first meeting was just the beginning of a complex journey, where past and present would intertwine in unexpected ways, and where everyone would have to learn to redefine the meaning of family. How will Alexander balance his demanding career with his newfound role as a father? What new challenges will arise from his decision to put his family first? Share your predictions in the comments. If you're captivated by this story of transformation, hit the like button and subscribe for more emotional chapters. Tech's main boardroom occupied 40 floors of a glass and steel skyscraper in the city's financial center. Since Sophia Jenkins's forced resignation, the hallways had been filled with rumors and speculation. The management team, accustomed to Sophia's dominant presence in all important decisions, now found itself navigating uncharted waters. Alexander had spent the last 3 days reorganizing the company's structure. He had promoted Laura Stevens, his personal assistant, to interim director of operations, and had delegated various responsibilities among the vice presidents. But the most significant changes were happening in his personal life. That morning, he had arrived early at the office, eager to complete his work so he could attend dinner at Claire's house. The prospect of spending another evening with his sons filled him with an emotion he had never experienced. The 2 previous dinners had been revelations. Seeing the triplets in their natural environment, learning their routines, their preferences, their little personalities. Matthew, always analytical, had proudly shown him his perfectly labeled mineral collection. Daniel had introduced him to his army of dinosaurs, detailing the characteristics of each species with infectious enthusiasm. And Charlie had played for him on his small toy piano, a simple melody executed with surprising precision for a 5-year-old. A knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. "Come in," he indicated, recomposing himself quickly. Michael Green entered with several documents under his arm. As finance director, Michael had been one of Tech's first employees and one of the few personal friends Alexander had kept from his university days. "Good morning," Michael greeted. "Do you have a moment to review the last quarter's reports?" "Of course," Alexander replied, gesturing to the chair in front of his desk. "In fact, I wanted to talk to you about something personal." Michael sat down with a cautious expression. "If it's about the canceled wedding, we all understand that these things happen." "It's not about Isabel," Alexander interrupted. "It's about Claire." Michael's expression subtly changed. "Claire Carter?" he asked, though it was clear he knew exactly who Alexander was referring to. "I know you saw her, Michael," Alexander replied directly. "At the shopping center, with the children, with my sons." Michael put the documents on the desk and sighed. "That's right," he confirmed. "I was so surprised by the resemblance that I almost couldn't hide it. They're your clones, Alexander. Why didn't you tell me?" The question contained no accusation, only genuine curiosity. "Because I wasn't sure if you knew," Michael explained. "And because Claire told me they were going to the wedding, I assumed you'd be surprised, but that it was something she had planned." Alexander nodded, understanding. "What I don't understand," Michael continued, "is how you could not know of their existence for 6 years. Claire doesn't seem like the kind of person who would hide something like that." "She isn't," Alexander confirmed, before briefly explaining the situation with Sophia. Michael listened with growing indignation. "Sophia intercepted all communications?" His disbelief was evident. I don't even know how to describe it. Have you considered legal action?" "I don't want a scandal," Alexander replied, "for the sake of the children. Besides, Sophia has already lost what she valued most, her position in the company and her influence." "Over me," Michael nodded slowly, processing the information. "And now what? How are you handling All this?" Alexander leaned back in his chair, allowing himself a genuine smile. "I'm getting to know my sons," he replied simply. "They're extraordinary, Michael. Matthew is a little scientist. Daniel has the energy of 3 children combined. And Charlie has amazing musical sensitivity. Claire has done a great job with them," Michael commented. "Exceptional," Alexander confirmed. "I don't know how she managed to raise them alone, complete her pediatrics specialization, and maintain her sanity." A comfortable silence settled between them before Michael resumed the professional topic. "Have you thought about how this will affect the company? 3 sudden heirs to the AH Tech empire is not something that goes unnoticed." Alexander had considered the implications, of course. "I plan to make an official announcement at the appropriate time," he explained. "When the children and Claire are ready. Meanwhile, I've updated my will and necessary legal documents." Speaking of documents, Michael extracted an envelope from among the reports. "This arrived this morning. It's personal, it says." Alexander took the envelope with curiosity. It had no sender, just his name written in elegant calligraphy that felt vaguely familiar. "Thank you," he said, opening it carefully. Inside was a single sheet of high-quality paper. As his eyes scanned the written lines, his expression shifted from curiosity to surprise, and finally, to indignation. "Dear Alexander," the note began. "By the time you read this, you will probably have already met your sons. I imagine your fury towards me, and I understand it. It was never my intention to cause you pain, but to protect you from failure. The company was too fragile then, and you too young to divide your attention. I gave you the gift of business success, even if it meant sacrificing your fatherhood. Now that you have everything, I hope one day you can understand my motives. Always yours, Sophia." Alexander crumpled the letter with a sharp movement. "Bad news?" Michael asked, observing his reaction. "Sophia," he replied, simply tossing the paper into the wastebasket. "Trying to justify the unjustifiable." Michael nodded understandingly, without pressing further on the subject. "Putting that aside," Alexander continued, regaining his professional composure, "I have a proposal to make to you. I'm listening. I want to reduce my direct involvement in the day-to-day management of AH Tech," Alexander explained. "Not to resign completely, but to establish a new balance that allows me to dedicate time to my sons." Michael looked at him in surprise. "You're considering a step back after everything you've built?" "I'm considering building something even more important," Alexander corrected. "A relationship with my sons. I've already lost 6 years. I don't want to lose another day." The sincerity in his voice was evident. Michael, who had witnessed Alexander's obsessive dedication to the company for years, couldn't help but smile at this change. "What exactly do you have in mind?" "I want you to take over joint executive management of daily operations with Laura," Alexander proposed. "I would retain the board chairmanship and strategic vision, but I would delegate day-to-day management. What do you think?" Michael considered the proposal seriously. "It's a big change, but I think it could work," he finally replied. "Laura knows the company like the back of her hand, and between the two of us, we could handle the transition smoothly." "Perfect." Alexander seemed relieved. "We'll prepare the announcement for next week." The meeting continued with the scheduled financial topics, but it was clear that Alexander's mind was elsewhere. When Michael finally left, Alexander checked his watch. 4:30 p.m. He had enough time to stop by the shop and buy a gift before dinner with his sons. As he left the office, his phone vibrated with a message from Claire. "The boys have prepared a surprise for you. Don't be late." An involuntary smile lit up his face as he replied, "Wouldn't miss it for the world." What kind of surprise do you think the triplets have prepared for Alexander? How will this new chapter unfold for Alexander, Claire, and their family? Share your excitement in the comments. If you're loving their journey, hit that like button and subscribe for more heartwarming moments. Claire's house was modest, but welcoming. A 2-story residence in a quiet residential neighborhood with a small front garden where 3 identical bicycles rested beside various outdoor toys. Alexander parked his car, considerably less ostentatious than his usual luxury sports car, and took the packages from the passenger seat. He had opted for simple but meaningful gifts: a set of rare minerals for Matthew, a scale model of a T-Rex for Daniel, and illustrated sheet music for beginners for Charlie. As he approached the door, he heard children's laughter and the sound of small feet running. Before he could ring the doorbell, the door opened, revealing the 3 boys with identical, expectant smiles. "You're here!" Daniel exclaimed, practically jumping with excitement. "Just in time," Matthew observed, checking the wall clock visible from the entryway. "It's 6 o'clock and 2 minutes. Charlie, as usual, stayed slightly behind his brothers, but his smile was equally bright. "Hello, boys," Alexander greeted, kneeling to their level. "I brought some things for you." The boys accepted the gifts with exclamations of gratitude and surprise. Claire appeared in the hallway, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "Come into the living room," she indicated with a smile. "Dinner will be ready in 20 minutes. The living room reflected the daily life of a family with triplets, organized within the chaos. Educational toys shared space with children's books, and colorful drawings adorned the walls. A small toy piano occupied a special corner, clearly Charlie's space. "Look, Mom," Matthew exclaimed, showing his new mineral collection. "It even has a real amethyst, and my dinosaur roars like a real one," Daniel added, pressing a button that activated a surprisingly realistic roar. Charlie silently scanned his sheet music, his small fingers tracing the notes with reverence. "Thank you," he finally said, looking up at Alexander. "Will you help me learn this?" He pointed to a simplified version of Clair de Lune. "Of course," Alexander promised, touched by the request. "We can start after dinner, if you like." Claire watched the scene from the doorway with conflicting emotions. On one hand, the joy of seeing her children so happy. On the other, an inevitable pang of unease at how quickly Alexander was becoming an important part of their lives. "We have a surprise for you," Matthew announced, interrupting her thoughts. "Can we show Mom?" Claire nodded, curious herself about what they had prepared. The triplets had insisted on keeping it a secret, even from her. The 3 boys ran off to their shared room and returned moments later with large sheets of paper. "We drew pictures of our family," Matthew explained seriously. One by one, they spread their creations on the coffee table. Alexander held his breath as he saw them. Each drawing showed basic but recognizable figures. A woman with brown hair, Claire, 3 identical boys, themselves, and a taller man in a suit and tie, evidently him. "This is Mom," Daniel pointed to his drawing. "These are us, and this is you, our daddy." "The teacher told us to draw our family," Matthew added, "and now you're part of it." Charlie said nothing, but his drawing was perhaps the most moving. In it, the fly in the suit. Alexander held a small piano while one of the children, presumably Charlie, played. Alexander felt a lump in his throat. With slightly trembling hands, he took the drawings one by one, studying them with reverent attention. They're beautiful," he finally managed to say. "I'll keep them forever." Claire, noticing his emotion, intervened gently. "Let's wash your hands before dinner," she told the boys, giving Alexander a moment to compose himself. When the 4 returned, Alexander had regained his composure, though his eyes sparkled with contained emotion. Dinner unfolded with the lively conversation only 5-year-olds can generate. stories from kindergarten, adventures with imaginary friends, and ambitious plans for the future. "I want to be a scientist and discover new dinosaurs," Daniel declared between bites of spaghetti. "Paleontologists have already discovered most dinosaurs," Matthew corrected with his usual precision. "I want to make computers like Daddy. I want to play music," Charlie added softly, "on a big piano." Alexander listened, fascinated by every word, trying to absorb these fragments of their personalities, these dreams that had begun to form without him. "You can be anything you want to be," he assured, looking at Claire for confirmation. "The important thing is to be happy with what you choose." She nodded, appreciating the message. "Exactly what I always tell them," she agreed. After dinner and dessert, chocolate mousse prepared by Grandma Eleanor, the boys insisted on showing Alexander their room. The space was ingeniously organized to accommodate 3 distinct personalities. Matthew's area, neatly arranged with books and educational toys. Daniel's area, dominated by dinosaurs and action figures. And Charlie's corner, where a small keyboard and various simple percussion instruments evidenced his musical passion. "We have a triple bunk bed," Daniel explained proudly. "I sleep in the middle because I'm the most adventurous. Matthew sleeps on top because he likes to see the stars from the window," Charlie added. "And Charlie sleeps on the bottom because he's afraid of falling," Matthew completed, earning an indignant glare from his brother. "It's not fear," Charlie protested. "It's that I like being close to the ground so I can get up first and play the piano." Alexander smiled at this exchange, marveling at their dynamic. He wondered how many moments like this he had missed, how many small arguments and reconciliations, how many shared discoveries. When they returned to the living room, Charlie went directly to his piano. "Will you help me now?" he asked, looking at Alexander with hope. For the next half hour, Alexander sat beside Charlie on the small bench, patiently guiding his fingers over the keys, teaching him the first few bars of Clair de Lune in a simplified version. Matthew and Daniel, surprisingly, remained seated nearby, watching with unusual quietness. Claire observed them from the sofa, allowing this moment to unfold without her intervention. There was something deeply moving about seeing Charlie, the most reserved of the 3, connect with his father through music. When the clock struck 8:30, Claire announced bath and bedtime, prompting the usual protests. "Just 5 more minutes," Daniel negotiated. "We haven't finished the song yet," Charlie added in a rare show of insistence. "Tomorrow is a school day," Claire reminded them firmly. "You can continue another day." The boys looked at Alexander as if seeking an ally. He smiled but supported Claire. "Your mom is right," he conceded. "But I promise to come back soon to continue the lesson." "Tomorrow?" Charlie asked hopefully. Alexander looked at Claire, who replied for him. "Your father has work, darling, but maybe he can come on the weekend." "Saturday," Alexander confirmed. "We could go to the zoo to see those pandas and crocodiles. What do you think?" The proposal was met with exclamations of enthusiasm. After goodnight kisses and promises of zoo adventures, Claire took the boys to get ready for bed. Alexander remained alone in the living room, looking at the drawings the children had created. Carefully, he photographed them with his phone, wanting to preserve every detail. Then, he sent a message to his assistant. "Cancel all my meetings at the Science Center. Saturday. Family matter." When Claire returned 20 minutes later, she found him reviewing the sheet music he had brought for Charlie. "He has talent," Alexander commented, pointing to the notes. "An innate musical ability." "He inherited it from your side," Claire replied, sitting on the sofa. "Your grandmother was a pianist, wasn't she?" Alexander nodded, surprised why she remembered that detail. "Semi-professional," he confirmed. She gave local concerts, nothing extraordinary, but her passion was genuine. She taught me the basics before she passed away. A comfortable silence settled between them, broken, finally, by Claire. "The boys have accepted you with an ease I didn't expect," she commented. "Especially Charlie. He's usually very reserved with strangers." "Perhaps he doesn't see me as a stranger," Alexander suggested. "Perhaps there's some instinctive connection." Claire considered this possibility, or perhaps you just clicked with them, she offered with a small smile. "You've been patient with them, genuinely interested in their worlds. Children sense that." Alexander leaned slightly forward, his expression turning serious. "Claire, there's something I need to tell you," he began. "I've made some important decisions." She looked at him with slightly tense anticipation. "I'm restructuring my role at AH Tech," he explained, "delegating daily management so I can dedicate more time to the boys." Claire seemed genuinely surprised. "Are you leaving the company you built from scratch?" "Not completely," he clarified. "I'll retain the board chairmanship and strategic vision, but Michael and Laura will take over day-to-day operations." It was a significant change for someone who had defined his existence through business success. "Are you sure that's what you want?" Claire asked cautiously. "I've never been surer of anything," he replied with conviction. "I've spent 6 years chasing professional success, not knowing that my greatest achievements were here, growing without me." Claire nodded, recognizing the sincerity in his words. "There's something else," Alexander continued. "I'm establishing a foundation. It will be called New Beginnings, aimed at supporting single parents. I want it to help with educational scholarships, childcare, legal advice, everything you had to face alone." Claire looked at him with renewed respect. "That's an extraordinary idea," she acknowledged. "I'd like you to be part of the advisory board," he added. "No one understands the real needs better than someone who has been through it." Claire considered the proposal. "I'll think about it," she finally replied. "It's a noble project." Before Alexander could respond, the sound of the front door opening interrupted the conversation. A tall man of about his age entered the entryway, stopping dead when he saw them. "Oh, I'm sorry," he said, with obvious discomfort. "I didn't know you had company." Claire stood up quickly. "Liam," she greeted with some tension in her voice. "I wasn't expecting you tonight." "You said I could pick up the reports for the conference," he recalled, before directing his gaze towards Alexander. "I didn't mean to interrupt." Alexander stood up, extending his hand. "Alexander Hayes," he introduced himself formally. "Liam Miller," the other replied, shaking his hand with professional firmness. "Pediatric neurologist and Claire's friend." The pause before the word friend did not go unnoticed by either. "Liam is my colleague at the hospital," Claire explained, visibly uncomfortable. "And we're seeing each other." "Claire has told me about you," Alexander replied courteously. "And I was about to leave. Tomorrow there's work, and the boys need to rest." He picked up his jacket and the boys' drawings, carefully putting them in his briefcase. "Thanks for dinner," he said to Claire. "I'll confirm the details for Saturday, if that's all right." "Of course," she replied, accompanying him to the door. Liam remained at a distance, observing the exchange with an inscrutable expression. Before leaving, Alexander added in a low voice, "They're extraordinary, Claire. You've done an incredible job with them." She nodded, silently grateful for the acknowledgement. "Good night, Alexander." "Good night." As he drove back to his apartment, Alexander reflected on the unexpected turn his life had taken in less than 2 weeks. He had gone from being a successful but solitary CEO, obsessed with work, to a dedicated father who was restructuring his corporate empire to make room for 3 little ones who had completely captured his heart. He didn't know exactly how his relationship with Claire would evolve, whether they would become friends, effective co-parents, or perhaps, someday, something more. Time would tell. For now, it was enough to have found his sons and gained the opportunity to be part of their lives. When he arrived at his apartment, instead of immediately heading to his computer for the video conference, Alexander stopped in front of the wall, where he had hung the boys' original drawings, framed with the same care he would have dedicated to artworks valued at millions. These simple pieces of paper represented the greatest wealth he had ever possessed, the unconditional love of 3 children who, against all odds, had opened their hearts to include him in their lives. This was the true fortune, the treasure no business success could ever equal. With this thought, Alexander turned on his computer, ready to conclude his professional responsibilities for the day. Tomorrow would be another day, with his sons another opportunity to build the family he never knew he needed until he found it. The circle that had broken 6 years ago was beginning to close, not in the way anyone would have expected, but perhaps in the way it was meant to be. Different, transformed by time and experience, but united by the unbreakable bonds of love and blood. What new challenges await Alexander and Claire as they navigate co-parenting and their evolving relationship? How will Liam factor into this complex dynamic? Share your predictions in the comments below. And if you're deeply moved by this story of redemption and family, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more extraordinary tales. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching us from? Tell us in the comments.